I don't want to give away any spoilers. The very first time we met, we had a 3-hour meeting. And by the end of that meeting, I just knew she was Lily. We had Blake choreographing and working with them and everybody. It was some of the most fulfilling moments on set, was just watching them figure this out. And
Hey, besties. If you think that Judge Lewis Lyman is in the pocket of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, I would say the last week or so has not been the best for Blake Lively. And while a lot was made during the discovery process of all of these discovery motions going in Blake's favor, there's been a few big rulings that have gone against these claims that Blake and Stephanie Jones are innocent victims in a scheme concocted by Wayfarer Studios and Jen Abel and Melissa Nathan to take them down. Instead, he seems to be giving credence and credibility to claims that Jen Abel is actually the victim in this case, and her phone is the target of the case, and that weaponization of these messages that were taken from her phone are why we are here today. Because Jen Abel filed a third party complaint, meaning that she was seeking to bring Stephanie Jones into the lawsuit with Blake Lively. And fundamentally, what she told the court in her third party complaint was that I am and what I was an employee of Jonesworks when all of this stuff happened that Blake claims happened, when this alleged smear campaign occurred. I was doing a job as a public relations person, and I was helping Baldoni with his good publicity and minimizing bad publicity, which is the fundamental job of a PR agent. I was working at the obedience of Jonesworks because they were my employer. And the only reason that I'm here today is a product of my employer colluding with Blake and exploiting private data that they took from my phone illegally, and that my employer is not actually being sued by Blake because of this collusion. In fact, the end of her third party complaint says Abel was named as a plaintiff pleading only because of an indirect consequence of Abel's obedience to the directions of Jonesworks. You have to remember that Abel was not and did not have her own PR agency at the time and was being paid by Jonesworks during the relevant periods of this lawsuit. And upon information and belief, Jonesworks was not named as a defendant in the plaintiff's lawsuit because Jones and Jonesworks conspired with plaintiff to exploit Abel's private communications that Jones and Jonesworks stole and unlawfully intercepted for the purpose of harming Jonesworks' former clients Wayfarer, Heath, and Baldoni. So he denied every single argument that Miss Jones made to dismiss this. And if you recall, her attorneys were very confident that these were frivolous claims that were brought against Jones and that they would all be dismissed. In fact, they said that about the claims that Jen Abel brought in a countersuit against her in a separate lawsuit, which the judge allowed two huge claims to keep moving through, right? And then around the Van Zandt sham lawsuit and the stolen data. And then in here, that same stolen data is the vehicle here is, well, it came from Jones and it got to Lively, and now it's evidence in this case. So Van Zandt and the data is still a huge live issue, and it seems like the judge is taking interest in it and doesn't see it as a one-sided narrative where Blake is the victim here. Okay. So his denial is incredibly technical, and it's probably going to bore a lot of you. So I just want to give you kind of the basis. Abel's complaint against Jonesworks contains three causes of action. The first cause is statutory indemnification, which is pursuant to California Labor Code Section 2802. This would require that the judge indemnify her because under the law of California, it's automatic. The judge did not agree with that part, but he did not rule because he said at this point in time, I don't yet know which choice of law is relevant. We need a little bit more information on that, but you have stated enough in this cause of action that it's plausible that you should be fully indemnified, which would shift the burden for fees onto Miss Jones. So under California's section 2802, their labor code, what it would mean is that if at any place in this lawsuit, if Abel loses, Jonesworks reimburses that. If Abel wins, she still has to pay. Okay. So if Blake wins, Jonesworks reimburses Abel for her damages and fees if he decides to apply California law. If Abel wins and claims against her are dismissed, Jonesworks only reimburses for the defense costs for Abel. Okay. So the primary motive here for Abel is that she wants California law to apply because why? Because it would pay for her costs and Jonesworks would be on the hook. And as the judge made clear in his order, this is what he wrote on page 25. Abel argues that because she undertook the actions for which she has been sued by Lively while she was an employee at Jonesworks and in the course of her employment for Jonesworks, Jonesworks is vicariously responsible for her conduct and should be standing in her shoes as the defendant in this case. He wrote that tracks the classic case for implied indemnity, which permits one held vicariously liable solely on account of the negligence of another to shift the entire burden of loss to the actual wrongdoer. He's saying that she pled that she was an employee, she was carrying out the directions of Jonesworks at the direction of Jonesworks, and that Abel alleges that she worked with the Wayfarer parties as clients of Jonesworks and that Jonesworks profited and was enriched by fees paid. Her complaint states that the conduct alleged by plaintiffs to have been committed by Abel and to have caused harm to plaintiff consist of public relations activities on behalf of Wayfarer and Baldoni during the time they were clients of Jonesworks. To the extent any such conduct by Abel was undertaken as alleged, it was undertaken in the obedience of Jonesworks' directions. Abel continues that the plaintiff's allegation against Abel are of conduct and communications directed at the press and public to garner publicity and to minimize bad publicity for her clients, Wayfarer and Baldoni, activities which are the very essence of a public relations profession. In sum, Abel alleges that she was named as a defendant only because and in direct consequence of her duties as a competent public relations professional employed by Jonesworks. Her allegations are sufficient to make plausible the inference that she conducted the actions at issue in the Lively complaint in the course of her employment at Jonesworks and at the direction of Jonesworks, and that the conduct was neither done with wholly personal motives nor in a way unforeseeable to Jonesworks. He says Abel alleges she was not at fault. In light of the fact that Abel was Jonesworks employees, that the company was in business of public relations, and that Wayfarer parties were their client, such inference is plausible. So again, he's confirming that isn't the defendant here, right? But for whatever reason, she's not a party to or a defendant, right? And it's only Jen Abel that was sued from Jonesworks, no one else. None of the other people that were involved. And what I find interesting is that Stephanie tried to argue, and one of the basis of her motions to dismiss was that you couldn't actually apply this to Jonesworks because she was working in disobedience. Like she was doing things that Jones said were out of the scope of what she should have been doing, and that Jones objected, and that she was actively trying to leave her company and she was conspiring to destroy her. And that's why she was doing this. And like there was all these sinister motives that Jones was trying to attach to Abel. And honestly, the judge just doesn't buy that. And I see that as a big win because I feel like what the judge is starting to see and piece together is what Wayfair has said all along, that the real wrongdoer here is the source of all of the wrongdoing in this case is not Wayfair. It's not even Blake. I mean, Blake is here, but Blake wouldn't be here if not for the initial actions of Jones taking content from her employee's phone that she was not allowed to take. She was allowed to have the phone under the law in California, but under that same law, 502 in California, she is not allowed to go through that employee's phone and extract private data that she's not entitled to have. There's a difference. She can have the physical phone, and she should have taken the phone and wiped it clean and just gotten rid of everything, right? Restored it back to factory settings. But instead, she didn't do that, and she went into her employee's phone, and that's what Judge Liman says she could be liable for that. Okay. And so he believes that Abel has pled enough on that. And then over here, he is saying, I actually kind of plausibly think that she's made an argument here that it wasn't her doing this with malicious intent, no matter what these stupid screenshots say. Right. And another aspect that he agreed with Abel on was one of the fundamental parts of Wayfarer's lawsuit was that really the person that lit the match that started this whole public feud was Miss Jones, because after they had made a truce with Leslie Sloan and they agreed that everything was going to be civil and they were all going to work towards the greater goal of this film, Stephanie went rogue and outside of what anyone at Wayfair asked her to do and went to Daily Mail and caused the shitstorm that we find ourselves in today. And she did that actually at the disobedience of Wayfair. They told her not to. And he wrote, the actions of Jonesworks, which Abel has alleged contributed to Lively's claimed injuries, are the same ones for which Label has been sued herself as a defendant, where Abel has alleged that Jonesworks caused the same injury to plaintiff. She has shown that the parties must have contributed to the same injury and was therefore stated a cause of action to recover damages. Jonesworks' argument that she cannot be liable for contribution because it owed no independent duty to Lively is irrelevant. Can you imagine that Jonesworks would say that she has no duty to Lively, but then justify Abel having some sort of duty to Lively when neither one of them had a contract with her? He's just saying that if anything happened here, I'm going to allow this claim of contribution, which basically means if she's held liable, that they would split the damages, Abel and Jonesworks. So what this means moving forward is common law indemnity, which is under New York law. He says currently this would apply. Jonesworks would reimburse damages and fees if Abel acted under its direction, right? So if Abel's held liable in any way and she proves common law indemnity, which will be part of the trial, Jonesworks is on the hook for anything that was done under the company of Jonesworks. It does not pay her legal fees. It doesn't shift the burden. Okay. It's only if Blake wins. And then with contribution is again, if Blake wins, Jonesworks has to pay its proportionate share if both are at fault. So in truth, she's looking for 3 different ways out. And right now, all 3 are on the table. And so if the big one would be that California 2802 is the one that he chooses, and then Jonesworks is on the hook for everything. So what does this mean long term? It's not a good one for Blake, okay? It is saying that Jonesworks is now tied to the case, that Jonesworks, as the pleading shows, if she can prove it, directed and controlled the conduct, which ultimately led to Blake's lawsuit, which is what Wayfair has said all along. It also would weaken Blake's I'm the victim. She claims that Abel and all of these people were doing this for malicious intent, and they were doing it in retaliation, of which the judge basically said, based on what Abel has pled, there was no malicious intention for her doing her job. If Abel was simply acting on her professional duties and she wasn't doing this to personally attack Blake, which means minimizing bad publicity and elevating good publicity for her client, they're sort of taking stock in that, you know what, maybe Jen Abel was just doing her job here and she's not really at fault. Because Jonesworks is now a part of the case, if this were to go to trial, the jury is now going to hear from Jonesworks and they're going to start to question, like, why isn't Jonesworks a defendant? Why isn't Blake suing Jonesworks? And if that's the truth, I mean, if they start thinking that opens the door, because in her claims, she says they took my information, they colluded together They did this to get back at Wayfarer and Justin and Heath, and it sort of cuts at Blake's claims that she's the innocent victim. And if she's actually conspiring with the person that would ultimately be paying her, the jury's going to have some questions. To me, what this shows is that the judge has been listening this whole time. He's been ingesting everything. He's seeing what happened with the Van Zandt stuff. He's giving credibility to it in the Jones versus Abel case, and he's giving credibility to it here. And if Jonesworks remains as a third party and not a defendant, it makes everything for Blake look really bad, right? Because the whole reason Abel says she's not a defendant is because she colluded with Jones. And it sounds to me like the judge doesn't buy that Blake is an individual, an innocent victim. It sounds like the judge sees this as a much more complicated story where it might not just be that Blake was wronged, but maybe that Blake and Stephanie wronged some people. You got to pay attention to the big rulings in the case because the impact of this one is very damaging for Jonesworks and for, Blake. If they had an agreement, if Jonesworks had an agreement that the only reason I'm going to hand this over to you is if you don't sue me, and then Jonesworks ends up getting held liable and they have to pay, it's going to put pressure on Jonesworks to try to get all of these cases settled. Because right now, she's in the corner. She could be held liable for stealing the data and for breaking the law. She could be held liable for then giving it to Blake. Blake could have all of her evidence kicked out. And then she's also going to be liable on the side of Blake's case if Abel is found guilty or found liable. It's going to push Jones to want to get out of this real fast, which could end up applying pressure to Blake. I don't know if it will, but these are really serious. I mean, this is pretty big consequences. And the allegations of exploiting stolen data survive, and it will be a part of a trial. That's a Friday win for you. So Blake keeps on getting nailed in the court. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.